the view from another part of publishing. We have I'm going to call it scholarly. I sometimes fall down and only say STM, but as Claire will remind me, there's scientific, technical, medical, and humanities and social sciences. She'll tell you it's HSS, my favorite thing.
All right. I think this is on. Yes. Hi. Hi, everyone. I'm MJ Courchesne. I am one of the members of the BISG Rights Committee. I'm also the founder and owner of Gryphon Publishing Consulting, independent rights permissions copyright consulting agency. And I'm here today with these lovely ladies who flew over the pond to come to be with us today. Claire Harper from Sage and Jessica Rutt from RCNi. And I don't remember what that stands for. So I'm going to let both of you introduce yourselves and your houses that you're working for right now.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica Rutt, and I'm International Rights and Licensing Manager at RCNi. So the RCN is the Royal College of Nursing, which is a big nursing union and educational organisation in the UK. And RCNi is the commercial and publishing arm of that. So we're a wholly owned subsidiary. We're a commercial company. I've worked in rights all my career. I out of university got a job as a permissions assistant for Macmillan, and I've just worked my way up through through the levels of rights and licensing. And I met Claire when we worked together at What Was Nature and then became Springer Nature.
Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm Claire Harper. So I'm the Associate Director for Global Rights and Licensing at Sage. We're an academic publisher, a global academic publisher. So we have textbooks, we have titles based, targeted at professionals, nursing students. And then, so we also have humanities and social science content, and we have science, technical, and medical content. So we're kind of an all-rounder in academic space.
So we're not exactly STM over here, but that's the way it is. I think a lot of publishing now these days, as we know, is evolving and everybody's a little bit of everything. So here we are. So earlier we heard from university presses and they were talking about things like open access and also being primarily nonprofit. Could each of you describe a little bit more about the way that you're publishing, if that is more on the for-profit side, trade? Is it more, do you have more open access? Is it a combination of things? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I would definitely say a combination. We are a for-profit company. That's probably quite an important thing. So, yeah, our focus really, and this is a motto at Sage, is building bridges to knowledge. So it's really important to us to like disseminate the content as widely as possible in whatever form that takes. And our content is kind of split. So we're about 60% on the humanities and social science and about 40% STM. So STM is a relatively new like thing for Sage. They've only been doing it like probably the last 15, 20 years. So, which in publishing is a very short amount of time.
We are primarily a journals publisher. We publish a title called Nursing Standard, which is like the biggest nursing journal. Like if you're a nurse in the UK, you would take that as a personal subscriber. Everybody does. And then we have quite a lot. We have sort of suite of software products and CPD and that kind of thing that we offer for nurses. Now, the content that we publish tends to be almost all behind the paywall. So we do offer an open access option for all authors. But it's quite hard for nurses to get funding for OA, as in life. That a lot of that money will go to doctors. Nurses get very overlooked. So we don't have much OA content, but it is something that I know an awful lot about open access and I'm really interested in and follow closely.
Very good. Well, so from what I'm hearing from both of you is we're really talking more about content here rather than books, sometimes journals. I imagine you've also discussed you've got databases, different things like that. So it's content and content licensing. That's more of an activity over here as opposed to a focus on a book or a journal or some other sort of type of thing like that. So would you say then is what would be like your most important licensing activities in a day-to-day? I don't know why. I know I'm loud, but I didn't know I was making the microphone angry. Anyway, so what would you say then would be your main focus then with your licensing activities?
Yeah, I think it depends. And you used the word important, and I think how do we define important? Because if we're talking about dissemination of knowledge, that's one thing. If we're talking about revenue, that's a completely different thing. So I manage teams that do translation rights, permissions, and also third-party licensing. So it's quite a broad range of stuff. If we're talking about importance of disseminating knowledge, I would say translation rights is probably the main focus there, because you're getting the content into new territories, new languages, you're reaching a wide range of people in that way. If we're talking about importance in terms of revenue and the bottom line to the company, then it's third-party licensing, because that is large volumes of content, potentially large value for quite little effort, I want to say. Like, I don't want to undermine my job, but you know, it's relatively easy in the way that it sort of manages itself. We own all the rights. We can just license the content to aggregated databases, for example. So that is the main focus for me, purely because of the revenue attached to it. But my teams spend a lot of time on translation rights and permissions and like the author management side of that as well, just making sure that authors, you know, they love to have their content out there wherever they can. So
So then with your relationships with your authors, it's more of a, are you wholly, are they work for hires? Is it something where you have a rights transfer? Is it, what kind of structure is that with your authors?
yeah, I mean, most of the time it's an exclusive license to publish. So they would give us the rights to license the content, publish the content, but they ultimately hold the copyright. So they get paid royalties on any deals that we do. But it just means that we can freely go and make the deals on their behalf, basically.
I mean, we are lucky with this. It's really straightforward, especially if you're just thinking about journals. Almost all the articles follow the same rules. You're clearing the rights. You can do pretty much what you want as a publisher with those. Yeah, it's much more straightforward than having to negotiate with each author what we're going to get from them.
And then how do you find your authors? Is it something that, are you working with the editors? What's the relationship there between an editorial side and then on the outbound side of your business?
Yeah, for that, like my team doesn't really get involved in the acquisition of editor and the authors coming to publish with us. That's really handled by editorial, I would say. And I think on the journal side, it's very much the authors come to us and submit their content, and then it goes through peer review. You know, it may get accepted, it may not. So that is very much a one-sided relationship, I would say. But on the book side, there's commissioning editors that will go out and find authors and convince them to publish with us. So
yeah, we for a journals publisher, we actually do commission quite a lot of content because we all just have a specific focus that can be quite topical and quite tied to what's happening in the nursing world in the UK. But the vast majority is submissions. So nurses do the work, they write up the paper, they submit it to us, and then we publish it. Goes through peer review and everything. Yeah.
And the peer review for, I guess, give a little short explainer if you could of what peer review is, because I don't know how many folks out there actually know that. I know university presses probably do. I see them nodding back there. But anyway, for the rest of us.
yeah, so I started my career in editorial, actually. So this is harping back to my editorial days. But basically, the paper would go out to experts within the field of the specific subject, and they would review the content and send back some feedback and say, this looks good, this doesn't look good, you know, can you prove the data here? Can you know, they'll come back with suggestions, and then the editor will be the one to say, ultimately, yes, we accept, or no, you need to go back with revisions. And sometimes papers go through multiple rounds of peer review. So, I mean, it could be years before your content's actually published.
Okay, well, there we are. Anyway, let's circle back to translations and the licensing, because that sounds on both of your sides. It's a big activity for you. So do you go to fairs like Frankfurt? Are there certain like association meetings that you go to manage those translations? How do you find those customers? Where are you finding them? Are they coming to you? I imagine they are eventually after a while, but tell us a little bit about it.
So the rights community in our part of publishing is quite supportive. There is a lot of industry events that we all attend, and we all know each other when we go there. We actually don't do very much translation of our content. Nursing is it can be quite specific to territories. So there people do like stuff with the RCN's logo, the logo and the brand. They like to be associated with that. In terms of practical stuff that they might need, it is often more of a local thing. But in terms of licensing, there's some really well established, I suppose, like structures that that the publishers are all sort of participating in our bit of publishing in our world. And yes, we're all at Frankfurt and all the other fairs, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think book fairs is probably the best place to meet with your customers and find new customers. And I mean, Jessica said this the other day when we were chatting, is like, you should never book up your entire schedule at a book fair, because there's always going to be someone to talk to that's going to come by your stand and say, have you got 5 minutes? And that those conversations can actually be really valuable. And sometimes just walking around, you bump into people, you have conversations, and be like, oh, do you know this person? Do you work with this person? And that is really valuable for us in a rights world.
Good. Yeah, it's all about relationships, right? So what locations, what sort of languages, where is the main focus of the translation work that you're finding in your sector?
Yeah, I think this was mentioned earlier, but China is a huge market for translations, and that is definitely our biggest territory. In terms of others, I did make a note, Korea and Greece apparently are up and coming. But yeah, it's very much China is the huge one.
Yeah, we don't do very much translation at all. Yeah. We do licensed content all over the world. But people have to read it in English.
And you have definitely a very different kind of model than Claire does. So maybe you can get into that.
So the content is more practical, I think, rather than like academic. So I think that does affects who the authors are going to be, and it affects the readership. And I think as a company, we still think a lot about the individual personal subscriber and what it is that they're going to want from us, as well as all of our institutional and licensing business. I think that is at the heart of it. Maybe a bit too much. Maybe more people should think about the broader picture. But yeah.
And is there a lot then, because you're dealing with nurses in the UK, I imagine, are they doing, this is actually partly my own curiosity, so are they doing studies about work with specific diseases or specific kinds of patients, and that's what is getting distributed around the world? Or
so apart from our flagship title, the others are all specific to a certain area of nursing, so pediatrics or oncology. So that's how we break it out. And different journals travel better than others. I think we're fine. What tends to happen in nursing globally is that when people are studying or training to be nurses, they follow like broadly a UK centric method or a US one. So where we have a lot more success really with traveling the content ourselves, it will be in the countries where they follow the UK broadly, they follow the UK method, and they tend to be the Commonwealth countries.
Okay, so we know we keep teasing AI. We're still going to continue teasing AI. That's for this afternoon. But anyway, so other than that complexity and that hot button issue, what are some of the other hot button issues that you and your line of publishing are dealing with right now? What's something that, you know, is taking up a lot of your brain space?
Yeah, apart from AI, I think open access is a big one that I feel like we've been talking about this for 20 years. I don't know. It always feels like it's coming, but it really is coming now, in my opinion. There's a lot more pressure in Europe for funding. Funding bodies are requiring authors to publish their content open access. So there are obviously different routes to that we have different models for it. Things like Green OA, where the preprint or the accepted version can go open access, but then the published version is still behind a paywall. But increasingly, we're seeing that the published version needs to be freely available and open access. So that's definitely something that's going to affect rights, because, you know, we can't then license that content if it's under a CC BY license, because that you can do whatever you want with that without paying. So that's definitely going to put some pressure on our business in the future, I think.
It is complex OA, and you were talking earlier about the different Creative Commons licenses, and they are, I mean, that is a bit of a headache because we really understand them, but you expecting that down the road people are going to know what those letters mean and respect that is really difficult. But it's really important that that stuff is in place. I think that, I mean, no, AI is coming later, but from this author side of that, I think people, when they assign CC BY to all their articles, you know, thousands and thousands and thousands of articles, perhaps weren't thinking about all the consequences of that and what that might mean in terms of new tech and new ways in which people might be able to commercialize your content. Yeah, sorry, I know we're not straying into that yet, but
That's it's interesting, and it's something that from your side, that's where we have a difference between what we heard earlier, where instead of the plan being open access first, we're learning to get there, I guess, or trying to figure out how to shift the model to work for that. So
yeah, and I think it's important to remember that it will ultimately affect the bottom line of a journal, like their P&L basically. If they suddenly lose out on licensing revenue, that is going to affect them, and it's not necessarily something that editorial always think about. So, you know, we always talk about we need to promote rights more within companies, and that's a big part of it, because they're suddenly going to lose out on a lot of revenue that they didn't realize they were getting.
yeah, we talked about this when we were planning this session. Well, I can remember like 15 years ago, us at my old publisher, we flipped a journal to OA, and nobody considered the licensing revenue. And it was actually a really medical title that generated loads of licensing revenue from pharma. And it was a killer. It was an absolute killer, a good learning curve for us. At the time, people only looked at the sales. It's worth remembering as well that with open access, the fee there's no way that is covering all the costs, right? So if you've got a publisher it's got lots of business models, got lots of stuff going on, you can accommodate that. But there's no way that's covering, you know, when people try and break out the cost of producing one journal article, there's no way that's covering all the stuff that's going on at the publishing house to support that article getting published and disseminated. So it is really complex for everyone. Everyone is figuring it out. Like these fees have become fairly standard and have emerged, but I'm not sure, you know, what they were really, really based on in the first place. Maybe like just what the market would pay at that time. So it's hard. It's really hard. It's hard for a publisher like us who sort of slips between the cracks of, we're not one of the really big STM publishers where we've got so much going on that we can support an open access program easily. Like our business model doesn't work like that. We actually, nurses don't get much funding for OA, but they are getting pressure from the universities to come to us and say, oh, this has got to be OA, So we're hand holding them a bit with trying to find funding. And should the RCN, our parent company, should we be a funder to support that? And how will that affect all of our business? It's really complicated. Yeah.
So beside OA, are there other things that you're keeping your eye on? Are there certain resources that you follow to keep up with trends in your little community? And I will be leading us into, a little group that you now have, a little club. But before that, what are you doing? Are there certain resources that you're paying attention to make sure that you're staying with the trends in your industry?
Yeah, I mean, I sign up for not a lot of newsletters that I don't always have time to read, but the Scholarly Kitchen is a good one, the Bookseller, obviously attending book fairs, going to other events. I know that Michael's here, but the CCC do a lot of webinars and stuff that I attend just about copyright issues in general. So yeah, I try and attend as much as I possibly can to sort of keep my ear to the ground, but I'm sure there's lots I'm missing out on.
Same, definitely the same. Yeah.
Okay, well then we will talk about, tell us about PLS rights and how you founded it and what are your members, where are your members from and where are you focusing, what are you focusing on together?
Yeah, so Jessica and I are actually co-chairs of the PLS rights group, which is the Publishers Licensing Services in the UK. They sponsor a group of rights individuals across the industry in the UK, where we get together and we discuss common problems within the industry. We have working groups that work on different projects. We had like an FAQ for rights professionals that has gone on the website. We have a mentoring scheme for people that want to get into rights. We can't take credit because we didn't found the group, but the group was founded in, I think, 2020. So one of our very first meetings was like early COVID. It was very strange. But yeah, Jess and I just took over last year as co-chairs. And yeah, it's a really great group of people. And I think Jessica said this the other day, it's a group full of doers. We get things done and it's really great to work with like-minded people and know that you're not the only person with the problem. It's we all face the same things, just in different places.
I know that in the BISG world, you've been working a bit on standardization, haven't you, in terms? And I think a lot of our community grew out of a project that I was involved in many years ago now, where we talked about standardizing the terms, what they all mean, if someone is clearing rights, so that if they get clear a right with you, it means the same as if they clear a right from Sage, or from Elsevier or from Springer Nature. So they're clear what they can do with that content once they've cleared the rights for it. And I think that it's always important to remember that, like, from people who are clearing permissions and coming to publishers for rights, they don't care so much about who you are as a publisher. They just know they need that bit of content, and it doesn't really matter to them like that much who the publisher is. So it's by standardizing that stuff, we make it a lot easier for them to do that. Make that journey easier. It means they're more likely to do it. As like with all these stuff in rights, I'm always going about this like a broken record, but like if you make it easy, find the right solution, make it easy for them to clear rights, people are more likely to do it. And because they would prefer to do that legally and have the proof that they've cleared the rights and that kind of thing. It's when things become difficult, in the olden days, I think you'd send off a rights request to a publisher and as a letter or a fax, and it could be weeks before you heard back. And in that time, you might just get, you would just give up. Whereas, we've got lots of platforms and systems now that can turn requests around really fast, and they're all built on, like a standard offering across all publishers. So I think that our group is really good at identifying like what are the pain points for people who are clearing rights, and how do we address them as an industry and make it easier for them to do the right thing.
Excellent. I love it when we all work together. So. Okay, I think before we wrap this up, I guess we'll just see if there's any questions from folks out there. And no, you're not getting lunch immediately. You still.
I meant to ask this question of the previous group as well, but you and the university press has mentioned China as an important foreign language translation market. Do you go to China? I've been a couple of times to the Beijing Book Fair, keep meaning to go back, and I just, there's been a lot of iterations of, working with those partners. They come to some international fairs, often they don't. So I'm just curious, in your world, how do you interact? Do you have an agent maybe in China or a colleague? If there's something you can tell us about that.
Yeah, so I'm actually very lucky at Sage in that we have an Asia Pacific office. So I have team members that are based in China, who are working in that market, and they obviously attend Beijing Book Fair. They go on visits to local publishers to build up those relationships. So we really have a dedicated team on the ground that are solely working in that market, which is great. It works really well for us. So.
We don't really do translations or go to China, but actually that has just reminded me that we are able to leverage the RCN with international work, because they have a lot of like links with nursing associations all around the world, and the UK government they work quite closely with the RCN to help get us to territories if we do want to go there.
Wow, that's two things that I'm picking up. One, for all of us who are rights people, don't hide your light under a bushel. Is that a biblical quote? The example that you gave about a journal converting to open access. In other words, everything was all of a sudden free with no understanding that rights revenue was going to be lost. That is, I think, often a struggle for all of us. For so many years in trade, rights was considered nice to have. It's become more and more essential to have. In this world, it can also get lost in a P&L and not necessarily be noticed. And so if you need a trumpet, let us know, because we've all practiced. And I just think it's really important that you make sure editorial, finance, CEOs know the profitable revenue that rights generates. Profitable, very low cost revenue. Of course, we do get paid, one knock wood, probably not enough. But there's no cost of goods, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So spend some time in your lives, rights people, making sure everyone knows what it is you're generating for those things. And then, because we heard from Simon and he's so focused on the things he cares about and the things he disdains, he won't mind me saying that. I just want to point out that in the scholarly world, there have long been subscription platforms of aggregated content that are spectacularly popular, well used, essential in the ecosystem, something that many of us, especially those of us who were recently students, have used. So when I say EBSCO, you say yes. When I say ProQuest, you say been there. And the idea that there are these subscription platforms out there and how they work is just something for trade people, if you're there, to learn a little about and think a little about. And these two and others here who have been involved in these large aggregated subscription platforms have a lot of insight into how important it is, and why it's a useful model for some of their mission, some of their financial goals, et cetera, et cetera. So I just want to, in case you were looking for something to talk about at lunch, ask someone about a subscription platform, not to mention, did you look at your subscriptions at the beginning of 2025 and decide which ones you were dropping because you're not actually going to BritBox, or is that just me? So we're all living in a subscription world. Yeah. Other questions? Yeah, no? Okay. Stay
Driving
happy,
on.
everybody, because we have another amazing